Alright, so I feel like it's time finally to do something practical on this channel by explaining how to set up a solar setup. A basic off-grid 12-volt solar system, the most bare minimum that you can get by with. And this is what I've used on every homestead I've ever set up, every off-grid place I've ever lived in. I've used this exact setup. I haven't done anything beyond what I'm basically showing you today. And it's worked for me. I've worked from home using this. I've powered laptops, car stereos so I could listen to music. I've had lights going all night. I've, water pumps, you name it. It's all run off of this setup. TVs, whatever. So fundamentally, you got three components, okay? So most important things are let's see, I'm trying to think of what the best arrangement here is. A battery, okay, battery, all right, and that's going to be a 12-volt battery, a deep cycle, or a lithium iron phosphate would work as well if you want to have a longer lasting battery. Deep cycle marine batteries work great for this as a starting point. This is really just the most basic setup, so I'm going to kind of stick to the basics. 12-volt deep cycle battery. That's the thing for this piece. We're going to have a negative terminal on there, and we're going to have a positive terminal on there. Okay? And then we're going to need something to charge that battery with, right? So over here, we're going to have our nice, pretty green panel. And it's going to have all of its cells. And those are going to output power, to put it as simply as possible. And it's going to have we'll say a positive and a negative, right? Positive and negative. We'll, oh, I hate how that happens with whiteboard markers here. We'll do a negative. Okay. Positive and negative on panel, positive and negative on battery. How do you connect these together? Fundamentally, you use what's called a charge controller, CC. And that'll have an input side and an output side, and it'll have a negative and a positive on both sides. Okay? All you need to do, and all you need to understand, and this is why I say this is dead simple, anyone can do it. There's no reason to feel intimidated by this. It's quite simple. You just have to follow kind of basic rules here. Input from solar panel, output from solar panel goes to input of charge controller. Step one. Okay? Output of charge controller goes to input of battery. That's it. That's the whole setup. So we've got a panel that puts out a voltage. It goes to a charge controller that moderates that voltage and does battery maintenance stuff like raising the voltage occasionally and lowering it at other times. And we've got a battery. So battery flows out of panel into charge controller, out of charge controller into battery. And then let's say you've got some loads, because this doesn't account for any loads, right? All you have to do with your loads is connect. Let's just say loads are down here. We've got better yet, better than loads, let's actually name some loads. Let's say you've got a light, and you've got a car stereo, and you've got an inverter, because you want AC coming out of this. Because this is all DC. That's an important thing to know. So in order to run standard household appliances with the two-pronged plug, you will need some kind of inverter. And if you want to run anything with this plug, you'll need an inverter. So inverter is going to probably be kind of vital for most people. So fundamentally, on those loads, we still have just a positive and a negative. And fundamentally, all we must do, actually here, we'll put the positive way over here just to make it easier for me to connect them. Fundamentally, what we must do is connect to the battery. Well, I didn't account for the positive battery. And color coding helps, by the way, but I have frequently used all black wires for everything. So color coding is not going to kill you as long as you know which wires are which. You mark them in some way, or it's obvious to you what goes where, because you don't want to connect things backwards. But fundamentally, just like a car, you just connect your loads, positive and negative, directly to your battery. Of course, with a car, you connect them through a switch. We're not including a switch here. We don't make it that complicated. Ideally, with your solar setup, you want to put fuses in line with these, but a fuse pretty much just looks like this. On our electrical diagram, a fuse is just like that. It's just a thing in line with your connection, one of your connections, ideally positive. This fuse blows, it disconnects everything. The fuse will detect if there's too much current flowing, i.e. a short or a wire that got burned, and it'll disconnect. That's all you really need. Fundamentally, you need a panel producing power going into a charge controller, going out of the charge controller to charge a battery, and then use the charge of the battery to power all your stuff. That's it. Fundamentally, that is the basics of solar. Now, there are all kinds of other little details you can add to this. You can add all kinds of extra stuff. You can add more fuses. You can be very particular about what gauge of wire you're using, the voltage of the panel, what the charge controller can do with that voltage. But fundamentally, solar panel into charge controller, out of charge controller, into battery, out of battery, into stuff. Now, let's go outside and actually do this, because I think that's even more important than showing you a diagram of what I'm doing. I want to show you what it looks like in person to make that aspect a little less intimidating. Let's go. Alright, so I struggled for a little while to get all these pieces together to make this video. And it's very windy out here today, so I don't know how well this video is actually going to turn out outside, but we're going to make it anyway. We're going to do it. So the first thing you want to do is kind of familiarize yourself with how to use this thing. In this case, I'm using the cheapy little Harbor Freight multimeter. It came for free with some other purchase. And I set the voltage to DC volts at 20 volts as the scale. And that gives me a pretty good scale. It means that this will go up to 20 volts. And I can now use, this is the positive obviously, this is the negative. By the way, never trust wire color coding. Mine, in this case, I use black as positive and white as negative because that's what I often see in houses. But here we've got red as our reference point, right? Red to positive, black to negative, 11.7 volts. This battery is approaching dead. Well, it is dead basically. But fundamentally, the fact that this was a positive number and not a negative number meant that I had the orientation of these correct. That's going to be very important when determining what the polarity of, for example, your solar panel is. Because in my case, my solar panel, both wires are just black, so it really doesn't give me a good reference point. I wired into this, which is just two extension cords, basically twisted together. The wires coming out of them are just twisted together to give me, from a 16 gauge extension cord, a 9 gauge extension cord, which is still not enough, really, not thick enough, but it's better. And I haven't burned these cables yet, so far we're doing good. But you want to, obviously in my case, I've got to twist these together. But I want to test these. I want to figure out, well, I've got black and white. What is black and what is white? Well, if we just kind of go here and we connect that terminal and that terminal, I don't know if you can see that. Oh, it just says 1 because we need to turn the scale up a little bit. There. Okay. So this is at 66 volts positive. Now, if this was a negative number, it's overwhelming my multimeter a little bit here, but let's just say we reverse it, and we make this connection backwards. Well, look at that, it's a negative number. So that kind of helps you understand what's positive and what's negative if you've got panels with weird polarity stuff going on or weird confusing wiring. So that's one piece of the equation. Next, we've got this battery, obviously. So we've got our panel here, which is I think 55 volt panel. We've got this battery, which is a random, just AutoZone deep cycle, Duralast deep cycle battery that I've got in a milk crate here, a literal milk crate. It's actually made of wood. It's quite old. I really shouldn't be using it for this, but I need a wooden box that would give this battery at least a tiny bit of insulation from the cold, because it's quite cold here. And then over here, we've got our charge controller. The charge controller should be connected to the battery first. This is a Make Sky Blue. It's a 30 amp model. The screen is pretty much shot on it. The whole thing is kind of worn. It's been used for a long time, as you can see. It's very weathered. It's very beat up. It's seen better days. But the important thing is that we know which is which wires go to where. And again, with following the same theme as the solar panel, I've doubled up 2 extension cords and shoved them into the 2 separate terminals. Again, ideally, you want to have breakers and stuff in line with all this, but I'm just showing you the basic fundamental setup so you can understand how it all works and how it's all put together. So, and I've used it just like this, to be honest, for a long time. As long as you understand that you're risking your own life and your own building by not putting breakers in here, it's okay. We've got our battery cables coming out of here. It's BT positive and BT negative, and that's what these cables are, and they're wired with the same color scheme as the solar panel, so I know what to do with that. So I'm going to start by connecting this directly to the battery to give me a starting point because this is an MPPT charge controller. In fact, even the cheap charge controllers like this here, you can find clone versions of this online, and they just say like charge controller on them. Don't be fooled, by the way, if it claims to be MPPT. A lot of the really cheap clone ones are all PWM. This is PWM. This is another charge controller. Same principle. Battery positive and negative. Solar positive and negative. And I generally don't connect to the load on the charge controller because it's usually really limited. Like it might only let you output 10 amps from the load or 5 amps. So I connect directly to the battery. This is another cheap charge controller. I think this one, when it was new, back in the early days of solar, it was probably a few $100s. Now you could probably find a clone of it for 20 bucks. This one, I think was 100, and again, you could probably find a clone of this for fairly cheap. And this one, by the way, itself, in and of itself, is a clone. But let me get this connected up to the battery, and then I'll resume the video from there. All right, so we've got our charge controller connected to the battery. You really can't see the screen very well out here in the sun, but I'll try to zoom in on it. Can you see that? It's basically just cycling through, listing off what it's doing. On this one, you can press buttons to see different stats, like what the voltage of the batteries is, what wattage or amperage it's charging at, etc. Okay, So anyways, sorry I had to pause the video really quick. Someone come to the door. But this charge controller will give you all kinds of stats. And a big thing is you just want to make sure that you connect it first, because it will calibrate itself and kind of determine what type of battery it's actually charging. A lot of them you can manually set this stuff, but this one, if you just connect it up, it'll figure out what battery you're connecting with pretty good reliability as far as detecting it. So we've got that connected. And now the next piece to this is we need to connect up the solar panel. It's in the sun right now, it's producing some kind of voltage, and pretty much same principle. Battery to battery side of charge controller, and solar panel to solar panel side of charge controller, positive and negative. So I'm going to connect that up and I'll resume the video then. Okay, so now we've got our solar panel connected. I mean, fundamentally that's it. You can't really see, but this is now reading that it's charging at 4 amps, which is something. It's not great. But now we just kind of clean this up. So I'm going to carefully tuck these wires in. Make sure not to tug on anything too much. Just tuck everything in real nice. I mean, fundamentally we're done, right? So this is the whole setup. But of course, that's not really any fun, is it? A panel charging a battery, it's not really doing anything interesting. And so what you really want to see is it powering something, right? All right, well, it took me a little while to actually find a load. And this is what I was able to come up with. So here's our little solar setup in a box. There's our little charge controller tucked in there. Our battery, all of our wiring rat's nest. And here I've got this lamp. Just a cheap basic lamp from Walmart. But oh no, it has a 120 volt AC plug on it. Whatever will we do? Well, we've got a pure sine wave piece of junk, cheap, best tech inverter. It does work, but the fan, of course, instantly wore out, as most inverter fans do. And we'll just connect it. Ideally, you want to connect negative last, so we'll connect up our positive lead here. A very chowdered up, very corroded positive lead goes there, and our negative goes there. Simple. And then we turn on our inverter, we hear it painfully come to life, and plug in our little lamp. And can you tell that there's light coming out of there? It's flickering because of the difference between the camera and the inverter refresh rate. But there you go. It's lighting up. And I can turn it off, turn it on. Okay. And just to kind of prove here, here's our power. So to go backwards, power goes into lamp from inverter, which is connected to battery, which is connected to charge controller, which is connected to solar panel. Positive and negative, super simple. So now I'm going to do the ultimate goal of this, which was to run an extension cord into this terrible looking hole in the house, which I need to patch up and work on. But I was going to run an extension cord in here so that if the power goes out again, as it has, I can run the furnace blower off of this setup. And I also want to run a little car stereo that powers some nice big beefy Bose speakers, just as a proof of concept in the house. So we're going to do that, and I will hopefully get to show you that in this video. See, I've got my inverter tucked in here. I'm not going to leave it connected because I don't actually plan to run any electronics inside the house off of this setup right now. But I am going to leave this inverter tucked into this little box in case if I ever need it for, a rainy day, quite literally, or an emergency power source. We can just close this up. And maybe it would be prudent to cut a little notch or a little hole in this box. Kind of don't want to damage this box. And it seals up pretty good like that. I mean, it closes up good enough for my purposes. But you know, there's our kind of basic setup, and let's get on with the fun thing. So here we've got a dusty old cheap dual brand car stereo. I disconnected the wiring harness for it to kind of show you how this works in practice. So these two are our positive wires, the yellow and red. In this case, yellow is standby power and red is full-time power, or maybe it's the other way around. So red is like, I think it actually might be yellow is actual, like when the key is turned on power, and then red would be when the key is turned off. So the red is like to save your settings and maintain the clock, and so it would connect directly to the battery in the car. And then yellow would be switched on when the key is switched on. So it'd be like an ignition power. And then black is our negative. And then I've also isolated out, we've got gray and white are the speaker wires. And so like gray black, let's see if I can actually show you. Gray black is one of the negatives. I don't remember which side is which, but we'll deal with that later. Fundamentally, I just want to get this working for now. And down here, I've got positive and negative coming from the battery. Unfortunately, this one's rather corroded, but it'll work, especially because it's not going to be carrying very much current. I just came in through that hole. I figured out what that hole was for sure. It was a dryer vent. So I'm going to just put a dryer vent cover on the outside, get rid of this ugly tape. The house came like this. We just moved in not that long ago, so we're not fully, you know, we don't know everything about it. We're kind of learning as we go, as you do when you buy a new house. But positive and negative are here. My little custom-made cable. And I'll show you on the outside what it looks like. You know what? Let's go ahead and connect all this up inside, and then I'll connect it to the battery outside. You can see the solar panel out there, and our little battery box and mess down there. Alright, so we've got our power coming in, and somewhere I've got some electrical tape. Where did I put it? Ah, here it is. Okay. So all we really need to do here is connect, and this is not live right now, thankfully. We're going to connect the positive wires to positive. We're going to tape that up real good so that it doesn't short. And then black is going to be our negative. We've got plus and negative connected. Now all we've got left is a couple of speaker wires. Is set up. So the way I'm going to color code these for myself is that the shiny silvery wire is going to be negative, and the copper wire is going to be positive. Let's find our speaker wires here. Gray and gray. 2 gray wires. Gray negative is the shiny wire. Gray positive is the copper wire, copper looking wire. And tape those up so they don't short. And by the way, I should mention, learning to solder and soldering all these wires instead of taping them is probably the best bet. But I'm just doing this kind of for demonstration. So do as I say, not as I do, would be the thing I would say here. Again, negative to negative. Oh wait, no. Negative to negative. Positive. It helps to keep your speakers oriented. You want the polarity to match, otherwise the bass won't be very good and it'll sound maybe a little distorted. That's a key. That's another topic for another video, theoretically. Fantastic. Look at that. All right. So we've got our speaker wires connected. I'm going to go ahead and put the speakers where I want them and connect them up. All right, I suppose it's time to show you what I got. I've got the car stereo, crummy thing, but it works. I've got it connected to standard speaker wire that's wired into these speakers, and the wires go back to the amplifier here. Here's the other speaker on the other side of the couch. Here's a cute dog. Squimbus. Squimbus. What's up, Squimbus? The final component of this is to connect up these wires, which come from inside, to the battery. And ideally, you want to actually use crimp-ons, not just twist the wires around the terminals. But this will work for testing. Just close that, tuck that wire in there like that, and we'll clean this up later. But this is, again, just for testing. I need to repeat that many times because this is not how I'm going to leave it permanently. And here we are back inside. Press power. Welcome. It'll make stereo noise. Wonder if we can pick up anything in here. It might just go all the way through everything and not pick anything up. I don't know. Yeah, I think we'll need to do Bluetooth or something. I don't know if you can see that, but I managed to get the laptop to pair up with this thing. So now we got to find a source of audio. Alright, and here's some uncopyrighted YouTube audio library music. I can that's essentially it. Thanks for watching. Please, if you like this video, press the like button, subscribe, etc., etc. Leave a comment, tell me how terrible it was, whatever you want to do. And I guess I'll see you in the next one. I'll probably make more videos in the future about this topic, but for now, thanks for watching. Bye now.